Sorry for tooting my own horn. In a New York Times piece, I argued for a separation of mosque and state, in particular in relationship to the Tunisia constitution. But also, I feel like there's, so many questions that we can't possibly address today, but that I think maybe people here had expectations as to practical matters. We hear a lot about stoning women to death, chopping hands. And I think the panel was really trying to come from an academic perspective and trying to give us context and background, which we often don't even have time to put in the picture. And I think that we ourselves need to bridge this gap between what we came to hear about and the presentations. But also, and I think that often, and I'm a Muslim too, perhaps I should have said that, we feel on the defensive most of the time, and we need to justify our thinking and where we're coming from. But for example, if you look at the United States or Christian countries, a lot of the laws come also from Christianity. Thou shalt not kill. That's a pretty major basis for laws. And then we talk about stoning women and so on. But also the death penalty is real in the United States. I don't know how that's compatible with the legal system. So I think that we need to make sure, I want also the panel to maybe address this flexibility of Sharia law, compatibility with human rights and the rule of law as that was suggested before. Thank you.
Yeah, where just perhaps that you want to see where mainstream law has failed us, can Sharia fulfill that void? The gentleman at the back there, he's been waiting very patiently, sorry. And I think with two more questions, then we'll just come to the panel.
Thank you so very much. My name is Ali Diami, the Center for Democracy and Human Rights in Saudi Arabia, and it's a station in Washington, D.C., not in Saudi Arabia. I happen to believe that the Sharia law in the 21st century is absolutely obsolete. Question to this panel, because most of these people here, I assume, are trying to figure out if there is anything there they can benefit from the Sharia law, or the Quran or the Hadith. I have lived under the Sharia law, and now I live under secular constitutions. I became really good Muslim when I don't live under the Sharia law.
So that's one prescription, okay.
So the issue here is this. What's in the Quran, what's in the Hadith, what's in the Sharia that Western societies can implement to improve in our civil rights, women's rights, gay rights, human rights, judicial system, separation of church and states, checks and balances, accountability, transparency, what's in the Islamic textbooks or Islam as a whole, we can implement in the West that will keep us better than we are already.
Thank you. Dr. Hans Kurel.
Thank you, Hans Kurel. I'm great interest to the panel here. One thing that concerns me is, and I should say first that I'm a son of a Lutheran pastor, but I had the privilege of being head of the legal department in the UN, where I had all religions present in my office. And never did we differ because of our origin here. We differed as lawyers, sometimes do, but not because we were Christians or Muslims and so on. What I'm worried about is the future of the world here. If we are going to be able to cohabit this globe, we have to be able to live together. In all states, there will be Christians, Muslims, you name it. We will all be there. And this is why I think it's so important that governance in the world is secular. And this is why question to the panel, to what extent you believe that it will be possible to have a secular governance also in Muslim countries. And also I'm concerned about the way women are treated in Muslim countries. And one of the most important things for the future is empowerment of women. I cannot stress that enough, both because of the population situation of the globe. With 7 billion people today, we will be 9.3 billion 2050. And I'm seeing now, working also now on the Arctic and Antarctica, the effects of the way we lead our lives on this globe. we will have tremendous challenges in the future. I have a Muslim friend, Labidi-Maiza, who I challenged once. He comes from Saudi Arabia, and we have this element of women not being allowed to drive a car in his country. And I said, is this really true today, that women are not allowed to drive a car? And he said, yes, it is. And then I challenged him, and I said, I can't think of a better way of demonstrating empowerment of women than allowing women to press the accelerator in a motor vehicle. He wrote an op-ed about it. And in this op-ed, he raised several questions, but one question, he said, the Quran and Muhammad never forbade women to drive a camel. So why not allow them to drive a camel? Thank you.
I think, because she has to, Dr. Labidi has to leave, so let me just get to her. Because I will come back to you, I will not let you be. Yes, please.
Thank you for all your questions. It reminds me of 2 years ago when I lived in France, and where questions are not only questions, but in mise en demeure.
Yeah.
And that's good for dialogue. I cannot, of course, and I do not pretend to have answers to all these questions, but I pick some of them.
The others will take the rest.
Yes.
Don't worry.
Of course.
Yeah.
So the issue of high morality or morals, and then corruption. And so I think it's not a matter of individual behavior. It's a matter of, first of all, laws and transparency and accountability. Because we can have persons who are behaving, let's say, on an individual level, having their prayers and being good, let's say, Muslims, but have no way how to run, for example, a collective good, how to run a public service. And it happens that very often they fall into corruption by good intentions. So for me, it's not a matter of morals, it must be a matter of laws. Law and democracy and transparency. And again, I return to the example of Omar ibn Khattab. He was a man of high morals, but he practiced transparency and accountability on himself, on his family. And he always seemed, when you read books describing him and his behavior, as if he is always trembling, quivering. Am I going to be at the level of, or the expectation of my mission? And this is what we have to do now. It's not because I'm veiled, that I'm supposed to do my prayers, that the citizen is going to give me his trust. No, he has to, first of all, see my program, and I have to be accountable to him, and they have institutions and democracy. These are two different fields, the morality and law and transparency. And the second point is the point of women. Women in Muslim countries, women and religion. I think there is no other way than since religious men and religions, etc., especially in Islam, are interested in women, women have to be interested in religion. And not merely be an object of the religious speech or religious discourse or religious implementation of law, but to be a subject, producing, understanding, explaining, interpreting, playing their role as Muslim. There is a main verse in Quran saying that Muslim male and female are in solidarity with each other in recommending good and prohibiting evil. And I think recommending equality, respect of human dignity, respect of women's rights is recommending good. And let me give you an example from the history of Tunisia. I think, yeah, a small country is an exception in many ways. Islam, when it entered Tunisia in the 7th century, it was implemented in Tunisia not through, let's say, armies, but armies of scholars. Armies of scholars. And in the 9th century, in the city of Kairouan, it was the heart of Muslim world in Africa in general. in North Africa, women were educated, daughters of imams, of scholars, and even of commerciants and of traders. And what happened in the 9th century? A group of Qayrawani women, they imposed what we call the Qayrawani Sadaq, the Qayrawani contract of marriage. At the 9th century, what are the conditions of this Qayrawani contract of marriage? That it imposes on men no polygamy. And it imposes on men the choice, it's up to the wife to choose where to live, where to dwell. And how could women at that century impose such, let's say, an understanding of Islamic law? Simply because they were educated, so they were empowered. And I found a document which really, I was extremely happy with this document. It is written or found by a historian, a Tunisian, Hassan Abdul Wahab, a famous Tunisian historian. He found a letter written by a Fatimi, the Fatimi Caliph, Al-Mu'izz Din Allah Fatimi, the Caliph who conquered Cairo. His wife used to be a Tunisian woman, half Arab, half Berber. And he had only one wife, not many wives or concubines. And he has written a letter to his governor, recommending them to have just only one spouse and not to waste time, energy, and money in marrying many women. And in this letter, he recommended, this recommendation comes from my companion, my dear companion, my honorable wife, al-Banin. Because indeed there is the influence of women in politicians. So I think it's education, and empowering women. Giving us, as women, we have to give ourselves the means to understand text, to co-interpret text, not because we are women, but because we have the expertise, we have the capacity to interact. And this way, we will, first of all, respect this command or this order. A holy order is to be, as Muslims, responsible for what we do, what we believe, what we, to order al-amr bil-ma'ruf, recommending good, and at the same time, we will contribute to advance the understanding of Sharia, of Islam, of our values. And at that time, for sure, we will have many men and women who will stand that stoning women is not just.
And clearly you have the passion.
So this is, I think, the challenge. Educating first of all.
And clearly you have the passion. Thank you so much, Dr. Labidi-Maiza. I know you have to go. Thank you so much.
I'm so sorry. I would like to stay and discuss, but I have to go.
So, please, thank you. And while we are doing this, let me come to you. Thank you so much. Shukran. Please, yes.
Hi, my name is Hamid Khan. I'm a professor of Islamic law at George Washington University in the United States and with the U.S. Institute of Peace. And I'm wondering if the panelists would respond to a scholarly argument by Professor Abdullah Naim that actually argues that that Muslims are better off under secular states. And he does so as an Islamic scholar, cognizant of Islamic history. Secondly, I'm also wondering if the panel, one of the important points that the panel will point out to is that oftentimes if you look at surveys of Islamic law, especially among states, the demand for Islamic law increases the greater the lack of rule of law. In other words, one of the motivating factors for why countries and populations demand an institution of Islamic law is because fundamental accountability goes wrong. And therefore, there is a correlation, there's recently been pointed out, that the more militant groups, oftentimes groups like Boko Haram or the Taliban or whatnot, often respond to demands for the rule of law, and the response they get is more stringent Islamic law. So I wonder if the panelists have comment on that.
No, we are going to, this will be the part, last 10 minutes of the concluding part. So I'll begin Dr. Hekmatnia and then we come to Dr. Mijula. And you have the maximum number of questions, so we will hold you to the end. Please.
Thanks about your question. Let me speak about the Sharia and Islamic legal system of where we speak about the words and the principle and the provisions, not behavior of the Muslim. The Muslims may misunderstand and misact our names are Muslims, but our behavior may not according to a fiqh. We speak about legal system, about fiqh, about Sharia, not about the behavior of Muslims. This is very important because some behavior of Muslims is not according to Islam, but according to our belief, our customs, our culture. And there are some points and some problems needs comparative study. You know, there are some legal systems in the world. For example, civil legal system, common legal system, and some philosophy of law, the schools of law. For example, natural law, positive law, historian law, the school of historian law. These are schools of law and some methodology of law. When we can speak truly, we can and we choose the special methodology. When we can compare between Islam, between Sharia and common law, or between Islam and civil law, legal system, we have a comparative methodology. This is very important. And some problems, say one of our friends, yes, there are some problems in Islamic society. Some of problems result of new experiences of humans, of scientists. For example, democracy is experiences. Have some principle, foundations, basic philosophy. When we can speak about democracy, before everything, we can choose the safe and the strict methodology. Democracy, for example, is a way of governing, not its only way of governing. It's the best in this world. When we can choose this way, we compare it with our foundation, our principle, of institution, and some behave according to the democracy. For example, the separation of power is very good. The separation of power, executive power, legislative power is very good. And according to our principles, we can choose it. But when we choose the theory of separation of power, when we want to legislate laws, rules, we turn to our foundations, our principles, our sources. Legislature is a very good way, but when we can use this way, with this methodology, with a turn to foundation, sources, in this discussion, We don't want a comparative study between civil law, common law, Islamic law. This is very important, and it needs a methodology for this study.
Thank you. Dr. Mulla. And also I hope you will harmonize Sharia law and mainstream law and promote the rule of law as said.
To take an example from one place and one time and to edify the idea on it's just a manipulation, it's a kind of manipulation of sectarian maybe goals or political, or somebody want to make his own ideology, no, and make it like an Islamic ideology. So we have to look what is from Islam or from Sharia and what is not from Islam and Sharia, and then we can judge. For your question, that's a good question. It's effectively the Sharia is the law of Muslims in the country, not the law of the country. Why? Because as we said, only the civil law is common for all of the natives of the country. But there is half of this law, even half of this law, it is also belong to one religion or to other. For example, Sharia says that non-Muslims have the right to have their own code for family law and for the hereditary law. So for the inheritance and for the family, which they have their own, and the Christian they have their own. What is there is just the other part of civil of the common law. This common law, of course, it mustn't be go in contradiction of the conscience of the people, because the people is Muslims. Then, if we can say that we don't accept the banking system, that we are go against the Christian or no, because it's part of the Sharia. Why not? There is two systems, and this is doesn't go. For other part, all of the rules must be based on moral politics, not on real politics. You know, United States, when they invaded Iraq, in profile of the human rights, which we already did, they killed more than 1.5 million people for the human rights of Muslims. Why was he didn't say nothing? The Sharia wasn't accepted. We have, you know, then always have to be a moral politics. If somebody have a problem in his country, political, ideological, or something like that, it is not the reason to come and put his point of view, you know. Of the democracy, we didn't say nothing, but I think most of the time is.
Thank you. Dr. Haq,
First of
you
all,
will wrap up everything and answer everybody's questions.
I will try. First of all, as it has been mentioned, that 85% people in the Muslim societies, they are asking for the implementation of Sharia. 83, okay. It is actually the majority of the Muslims living in Muslim societies, they are fed up with lawlessness in the Muslim society. And the demand for implementation of Sharia is actually demand for eradication of corruption, justice, and accountability. Their role model is the society of the Prophet and the early caliphs. As the early caliphs, they were accountable to ordinary people. The present Muslims, majority of the present Muslims, they are saying that our rulers should be accountable. in front of the people. This demand is for one reason is that another reason. Unfortunately, there are two things which are mixed by Muslims and by the non-Muslims. True mainstream Islamic teachings and the practices of the Muslim societies. Sometimes an extremist group, for example, attitude of the Taliban towards the women, it is portrayed that this is the normative tradition of the Muslims. No, not at all. We have to understand teachings of mainstream Islam are different from the practices of the Muslim societies. Sometimes the compatibility level is high and sometimes the compatibility level is low. Therefore, we have to understand that Islam is not, which is portrayed by some groups of the Muslims. Islam is laid down in mainstream Islamic teachings. And this is the reason, Madam has rightly pointed out that Muslim societies are the most corrupt society. In spite of that, they are demanding for the implementation of Sharia. They are demanding for the implementation of Sharia because they are believing that this is the only way to eradicate the corruption, eradicate the injustice, and eradicate the lawlessness in the Muslim society. As far as my brother from Afghanistan has pointed out, that is it Sharia to stoning the people and chopping the hands? This is not the objective of Sharia. The objective of the Sharia is that the society should be without adultery, society should be without theft. Objective is not to kill the people, objective is not to chop the hands. And if we look into Islamic history, we will have only few numbers of the people when we can have these punishments implemented. Because the objective is not the implementation of that punishment, the objective is to provide peace and security to the Muslim society. As Madam has pointed out, Ibn Ashur in Maqasid of Sharia, he has discussed these things in detail. As far as the question related to relationship of Muslims with the non-Muslims and particularly with people of Huech. Actually, if we look into this part, this is one of the most ignored part of the Sharia, which is usually not discussed. How Sharia regulates the individual conduct of the Muslims with the non-Muslims. For example, in classical jurisprudence, if a Muslim is married with a non-Muslim woman, there are very interesting commandments which are never mentioned. For example, the non-Muslim wife will have the right to study and recite Bible. She can drink wine. She can brought cross to her home. Such type of many instructions are there which are guiding multi-faith society and multi-faith families, and these guidance can be contributing to the plural societies in which we are living. As far as the situation of women rights, this is very important. Here again, from the practices of the present Muslim societies, it is considered that Islam is hostile to the women. This, I just like to say that the Jahiliyyah, pre-Islamic Jahiliyyah, that was eradicated by the Prophet Muhammad, that is presently implemented in the Muslim societies in case of the women rights. There is a story that Prophet Muhammad was sitting and one person came to him. He said, in Arab, in pre-Islamic period, they used to kill their daughters. He said, I had a beautiful daughter. When her age became 6 years, I took her to the desert. I dig a hole. I placed her in the hole and then I placed sand on it. Prophet was listening to it and he was weeping. And then he said, whoever will give birth to 3 daughters or sisters and bring up them and educate them, I and he, we will be together in the paradise. Islam and Quran, there is a Surah An-Nisa, very woman. This is the uniqueness of the Quran, that a whole surah, large surah of the Quran is named on the woman. The attitude, for example, in Pakistan, the Muslim scholars, they are saying women cannot go to the mosque. And if you go to the mosque of Nabawi, there is a particular door, the name is door is Babun Nisa. And this door is from the day of the Prophet, because Prophet has fixed 2 days for the women, and women came and complained that 2 days are not sufficient, days should be increased. And we have the evidence that all the 4 or 5 ways of earning, women, they were working in agriculture, they have trade, they have jobs, and they were educated in that first Islamic society. But unfortunately, we, the Muslim societies, are denying them. Quran has revealed and fixed the share of the women in the property. Until 1970s, we in Pakistan, from the colonial period, we were not giving share to the women according to the Quran, but we were distributing property according to the normative law, in which the property was distributed among the males only. So the anti-woman attitude in the Muslim societies, we are killing our daughters. Yani honor killing that is practiced in Muslim societies. It is the Jahiliyyah which was eradicated by the Prophet Muhammad, but we have implemented. We brought it back today. If a boy is doing anything wrong, no one is asking. If a girl is doing something wrong, she just like, this is a right that has been given to her by Allah and by the Prophet. Prophet and Allah said that girl has to be asked at the time of marriage, and no marriage can be conducted without the consent of the girl. But our male-dominated society, they like to slate this right that has been given to women by Allah Almighty. Our sister from India, she has asked, what would be the challenge? The challenge is that the Sharia has been too much politicized, and Muslim groups in the Muslim societies, for example in Pakistan, Islamic parties, Islamic religious parties, they are unable, in this recent election, they got only 1% vote. Jamaat-e-Islami, they have 3 members in the National Assembly, but they are repeating the same implementation of Sharia because this is their political objective. This is not their religious objective. They like to use it because they are considering that this is the only way to retain their political identity and to keep their position inside the Pakistani society. And the extremist groups that are working in Pakistan and Afghanistan, they are recruiting uneducated but dedicated Muslims on the name of Islam. If they are not using the Sharia, who will come? Who will become suicide bomber? Suicide bombers, they are dedicated Muslims, but ignorant Muslims. They do not have information of Islam, and these extremists, they portray it in front of them that this is a style, this is a Islam, and when you will come, there is a joke, a very famous joke in Pakistan, that one suicide bomber, he came for the attack, and he, instead of martyring in that attack, he became injured. He was brought to the hospital, and when the nurses was there, he was thinking, these are not the nurses, these are the poor in the paradise. So actually this is the situation that we are existing. For understanding of Sharia, we need to understand it academically, we need to understand its objective, and we have not to go the apparent portrait of Sharia, but we have to go to the philosophy of Sharia. The philosophy of Sharia is compatible with humanity, it is compatible with rule of law, and it is compatible with justice and accountability.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This just brings us, this is only the beginning. As you see, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of passionate discussion. And I hope that through this initiative, with the World Justice Project, that we can incubate some specific programs on how to have people better understand Sharia, and vice versa, how Sharia can be compatible with mainstream law. I leave it to you to judge. Is there a room for Sharia? What room is there in Sharia and mainstream law? What can we do? But thank the panelists. Thank you all. Thank you very much.